Let's start with the signal chopper and the repetitive saving mode, which means that all products will be the same. Product A is the same as the next product. It's also product A. The relative speed of the table concerning the applicator will be this. And what we're going to do first is to make a 0% saving. Therefore, there's no point in indicating the bead and dot values. And on this one, in order to see a significant saving, we're going to try a 50% saving. The bead will be 15% and the dot will be 5%. Why? Because these are the standard values and we're not going to move anything and leave it as it is. Here we have a Micron Plus with the internal chopping option. If we click it, we access the shot control and the repetitive product saving. Then we hit the product option, edit the product, and within that product editing, the first value we're going to enter is 0%, and the second value that we'll enter is 50%. After this, we save the setting. We're looking at a 0% standard bead and the 50% saving on that same bead. It shows a final bead of 15%, an initial bead of 15%, and intermediate dots of 5%. Therefore, if we do the sum, we have intermediate dots equaling a total of 20%, which added to the initial 15% and the final bead's 15%, totals a 50%. But what does this 50% represent? This shows that there's been a 50% worth of adhesive applied and another 50% not applied. Okay, the next test we're going to do is 60% saving. We keep on using the standard mode, which means it won't let me move either of these two values. By default, the initial bead is 15% and the dot is 5%. And the next one we're going to do is 40%. And we continue to use the standard mode. Since I'm not going to touch anything, this is 15% and this is 5%. As we said, we're going to set a 60% saving and here a 40% saving. We save the setting and fire. What have we accomplished? This one here and this one there are equally 15%. These are 5% dots. This here are 5% dots. And this one here is again 15%. If we do the math here, in both tests, it all equals 40%, which means we get a 60% saving. We are going to switch to advanced mode because we want to be able to manipulate the initial bead and the final dot. Before, it was 15%. Now, what we are going to set is instead of 15%, 5%, and instead of 5%, 15%. Well, let's try a 60% saving, and let's try here a 40% saving. Again, since we can move these two, for example, let's set this to 20% and 20%. Now let's enter advanced mode. In advanced mode, it not only shows us the savings, but also shows us point B, which is the initial bead, the initial string, and point D, which are the dots in between. The standard is 15% and 5%. But to change the standard to another, well, in the first one, we're going to reverse it. Instead of 15%, we're going to put 5%. And instead of 5%, we're going to do 15%. And at the bottom one, at 40%. What we're going to do, they're all large. So we're going to do 20% values. With this new configuration, We save it and we can fire. What are we asking for here? A 40% saving, which means I can shoot 60%. How is this 60% distributed? 20%, 20%, and 20%, which is what I asked for here. This is point B, which equals to 20%. This is also point B, which equals to 20%, and this is the dot in the middle. And here I've made the inverse change. The initial point of B is 5%. It's tiny. As you can see, it perfectly calculates the beginning and the end. It knows when it's going to end, and therefore it fires it perfectly. And in the middle, there's 2 or 15%. If you do the sum, you'll see that it's 60% of glue that I don't apply. Let's explain the topic of learning, where until now I was at speed of 60 meters per minute. What we're gonna do is test a pattern, for example, both at 55% saving. And to show off the difference between the top and bottom ones, this one is going to be standard, which is 15% and 5%. And the bottom one, we're going to do a kind of chopping, all 5%. What we are going to do is set two 55% savings, the percentage of 55%, and here also 55%. And then the points we've decided to make are, the first case, 15% and 5%, and in the second case, 5% and 5%. Simply, we're going to do a test to then see how it changes. Initial beats of 15% and 15%, and yet here they're all 5% dots. What happens if here, where there was a speed of 60 meters per minute, I changed that speed? Before, we were at 60 meters per minute, and we put 80 meters per minute to make it run faster. Since it's going to run faster, the signal that this client's PLC is calculating will be shorter, but the chopper doesn't know that. It will stop the signal. I had an initial beat here. It started making little dots, and when it was about to make the final beat, I didn't have time. The signal was stopped. And here I start. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But the next time I learn, I'll calculate it and I do it right. We go back to the 60 meters per minute we originally had. We've lowered the line speed and the chopper doesn't know it. And it wanted to insert 9 dots here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But if the signal continues, well, last dot gets stretched. It stretches, it stretches, it stretches until it ends. And here the same. I make a correct initial bead, I make 3 intermediate dots, and the final bead is longer, so it gets stretched. For the next time, I've already learned. So I make a good initial bead, I make a good final bead because I already know where I'm going to end. And here, I place the 9 dots well distributed. I only need one signal to learn and correct. Variable means that product A is different from product B, also different from product C. Every time it fires, it's going to have a distance here. Here, there is going to be a much smaller distance. And here, again, we have a long distance. These are 3 different patterns. What does the program ask us for here? Here, the program asks us for a saving. We're going to start with 0% to see what the shot would be like if we had nothing. So this doesn't interest me. And in the case of having a saving, let's say 50%, what we're going to put is the time that's going to be on, and which will be the size, 5. And here, automatically, the program will calculate a time for us. This is a time by machine, which I don't control. And this will be the size of dot. Now let's go to the shooting mode, and instead of repetitive product saving, what I'm going to choose is variable product saving. Now that we have it, I put it back to work, and from there I have it running and ready. Now what we're going to do is hit product, edit product, variable saving, edit, and it will ask me for two values. The first value is the savings value, for which we're going to put 0%. And the second value I'm going to log is 50%. At 50%, I get asked to provide the dot size, which is going to be 5. Automatically, if I ask for a dot size of 5, I will have a gap size of 5. Then I hit save and it works. The top one has no saving. The bottom has 50% saving with dot sizes of 5. What's the issue here? I know when I start and I finish when the signal stops. In this case, since the dots are very small, it gives the impression that the product is finishing well, but it's not. It's ending when it's due to end, and that's what we're going to see in the next example. I'm going to make a bigger dot, and by making the dot bigger, I'm going to notice larger gaps. The next test we're going to do is maintain the 50% saving in both cases. But we're going to see that when the initial time on value is very large, for example, setting it at a value of 17, savings will also have to be very large. I'm going to have to leave very, very large gaps. And to show that it's going to be done correctly, I'll put a 6 here, and then the machine will put a 6. Keeping this 50% value, what we're going to do is have two shots with a 50% saving. But we're going to change the dot size. Why? Because with these small dots, it does a good job. But be very careful with starting to have very large dots. Because if I put a 17 milliseconds dot, I'm also going to have a 17 millisecond spacing. To see that one comes out right and the other one comes out badly, let's put a 6 here and it will calculate a 6. And with all this, we would have the difference. Okay, the next test we're going is 60% saving. We keep on using the stat mode, which means it won't let me move either of these two values. By default, the speed is 15% and is 5%. Next one we're going to do is 40%, and we continue to use the standard mode. Since I'm not going to touch anything, this 15% and this is 5%. Okay, we're going to 6% saving, and here a 40% saving. The setting and fire. Accomplished. This one here, this one there are equally 15%. These are 5% dots. This here are 5% dots, and this one here is again 15%. If we do the math, both tests, it all